What a race from the man from Mexico. Sergio Perez was excellent in this race, and a couple of other runners in the race that were doing very well. This makes the championship look a lot different with Sergio Perez actually being able to perform, and I would finally say, I've been very critical of him over the whole entire year. I would say this is his first race win on merit, and very impressively on a track that's very hard to actually not make a mistake. And he made very little mistakes and actually outraced Max Verstappen the whole entire race. There's a lot to talk about on that, a lot to talk about with the really top four teams, and really what we saw in Baku, just explaining what has happened. So I expected definitely a more, I'd say, crash heavy race, definitely more stuff to happen and a more chaotic one, but at the same time I can understand why the race was like this. And I think the biggest reasoning being that a lot of probably drivers were pretty afraid of what the tires were what was going to happen to really the tires. I mean, we saw that with Fernando, we saw that with Leclerc, and even the commentary at the end realized that by the end of the Grand Prix, they had saved so much tires to the point it was like, okay, now we can really push. Where in reality, they could have been pushing a lot earlier and a lot faster. Because Fernando and Charles, by the end of the race, were actually keeping up with the Red Bull's pace. Now, this isn't to say that they can do that lap on lap on lap, because they can't. But another thing was found out with Red Bull that I find very interesting, and this pack is getting closer, and this season is getting spicy. We're going to get some banger races, and I expect Imola to be an extremely close race between the four of them. Miami might still be a Red Bull takeaway, but it will be, yet again, a closer track. I think that the top four teams are very much coming closer together, and finally Leclerc had a great race. As for Aston Martin, they had an extremely strong and solid car, and that upgrade package has worked wonders for them on the straights. They're actually a very intimidating team against most other teams on the straights now, and it is pretty hard to overtake them. Do they have that Red Bull advantage? Far from, but they are a lot better and a lot to take away from that as well. Before I talk about Sergio Perez though, thank you for all the love on the channel. I love you guys. You guys are the genuine best. You guys make this channel what it is and make me as happy as I am. So thank you all so much. If you're not subscribed, please do. Leave a like on the video, comment on the video. Let me know your thoughts about the Baku Gp. Let's get back into starting with the top four teams. All right, so for Sergio Perez, because he's the one that won it, and specifically on him, his management was fantastic. Max was good. Max was competing, but Sergio Perez was on another level, and he was what Max is on most weekends. Dominating the race, there were no chances of him getting overtaken. He would have even overtaken Max if it wasn't for the safety car. I fully believe that Sergio Perez was the better driver of the two today, because if he wasn't, Max would have caught him, and I don't think that was possible. Sergio proved who he was today, and I did not expect this. I am so happy for him. This is a result that I think Sergio finally deserves, and this will put a lot of confidence onto him going into the race weekends ahead, that he can beat Max Verstappen. Like, this guy looks beatable, which is, fantastic. This really, really puts him up the ranks for me, and I am extremely happy for Sergio, and fantastic job on the tires and race pace management the whole entire race. What we did see with Red Bull is that they do have a huge advantage in the DRS straight. I mean, oh man, dude, that thing just flies when it opens its DRS. But that's about it. That's about it. It's not a huge advantage in the real straight when it doesn't have DRS open. It's not a huge advantage in its cornering speed. It's got amazing tire grading though, but so does the Aston Martin. And Mercedes is pretty solid too. But that's it. That DRS straight is really what gives them a huge advantage and makes them thoroughly the best car on the grid. So comebacks across the 2023 season are extremely possible. Let's talk into the second team, Ferrari. Ferrari was, I think, fantastic for its weekend. Even Carlos Sainz, I think, had a pretty good race. Now, it wasn't a Charles Leclerc type race, but it was an okay race because he was also managing tires. They did the same type of strategy. They both fell back a lot. They were both reserving a lot towards the very end. I think that they would have gotten overtaken by the Aston Martin if they were to play out their actual strategy a little bit better. But listen, it was solid. Leclerc was a beast this weekend, and that guy in one lap is the fastest on the grid. By far, there isn't a faster qualifier on the grid than Charles Leclerc. That guy's a beast. I mean, like, I've always loved him, but you can't hate how good this guy is in a qualifying lap. He genuinely extracts everything out of a car that does not perform to that level. He wrung the neck out of that car even in the race. I mean, he beat Carlos by almost 25 seconds. So it comes to show you the levels that Charles Leclerc drives at when he's not overdriving the car. Now, as for Aston Martin, I actually think this race was probably their best race on race pace merit alone this year. I think Fernando was holding a little too much on those tires. I think he could have genuinely overtaken Charles, and it was even shown at the end of the race that he caught up within 4 laps. It was 3.5 seconds almost, so he had the pace to beat him. I think he was misjudging just by the tiniest bit how much he could have genuinely pushed and whether he could have gotten that podium. He genuinely could have. He could have had the podium. Is a P4 solid? Yes. And what did Lance Stroll finish? P7? Lance had a couple of mess ups, but I think Lance should have easily been P5 here. I think he could have been overtaking both Carlos and Lewis Hamilton, but probably grained the tires with a couple of those mistakes, and that probably didn't really end up helping him out. But that rear wing is doing wonders, and fantastic job, like fantastic job for Fernando throughout this race and really through the weekend, because they had a lot of issues. Their DRS not opening was an issue, but the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway we can take with this Aston Martin team is they do have now some top speed. They are competable with the top 4 in straight line speed, and I would argue they're probably even better than Mercedes in straight line speed, which I thought was going to be a tough task for them to actually go for. But this was a very good weekend, I think, for Aston Martin as a team, but also seeing as to they can catch up in upgrades, and this team is coming for a fight. 2023 is more than alive, and Baku has definitely proven that to us. This would have been the weakest track for them. If they would have had the same rear wing from Australia in here, they wouldn't have been anywhere close to the top 4. Not anywhere close, because they would have been missing a lot of top speed, and that DRS would have been barely efficient. It was opening during the race. It seems that they've solved their problem. This is a big deal. This is a very big deal and a great race by Aston. Now, the last team I want to talk about is Mercedes, and I think Mercedes had a okay race, and I'm going to explain why. I talked about it even in my sprint race analysis. A lot of people had big expectations for Mercedes going into this race. I think that's the wrong, really, way to think. There was an expectation, sure, and they improved upon a better already Australian GP weekend. You think a P2, this has got to be like the highest of the highs. Sure, by result, highest of the highs, but by actual pace and what the car really needs, it's not. They weren't graining tires at all. Bahrain was an awful track for them at the beginning of the year, and their rear tires were getting smoked. They were good in this track. They were able to compete with both the Ferrari and the Aston Martin throughout the whole entire race. What they're really missing, it's the drag. I mean, the drag is really killing them, and that's why Lewis wasn't able to actually catch up to Carlos. Now, the wing that they bought seems to have helped a little bit with DRS efficiency, and I thought that it would, but they still have a lot of drag going through the car, and I'm going to take a guess and say that that underfloor is just making that car extremely draggy, hence why we don't get a faster W14 right now, and I would still wait till Imola. I don't think Miami will be a great weekend for them, but they already talked about that they're not changing much of this car going into 2024, like at least the philosophy of it, because James Allison genuinely believes this could be the fastest car on the grid, and that is what they're fighting for. I would not have any doubt in that. I think that the actual Mercedes car improved this week, and I wouldn't really fault them on how the race went. It was a battle of the top 4 teams, and they were just the slowest out of the top 4. Lewis had a great race. I think him being able to pass both Lance, and he should have been able to pass Carlos if it wasn't for that straight line speed disadvantage. It was a good race. I think a very thoroughly thought out race by all 4 teams. I think every team can come out of this saying, we learned something. There is a chance to beat these Red Bulls. And that is a big thing going into this 2023 season. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited. There's so much more, and we got a lot of race weekends ahead to talk even more about everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.